My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 74 years old, and I never thought I'd hear these words come out of my own son's mouth. Dad, we can't keep going like this. You need to move out of this house. But what he didn't know is that this old man he considered a burden had an ace up his sleeve that would change everything forever. Listen to me carefully until the end of this story, because what I'm about to tell you might help you understand something very important about family, respect, and the consequences of our decisions. And when you finish listening, I want you to tell me what city you're listening from and what you'd do in my place. The phrase that changed my life I heard on a Tuesday afternoon, after 40 years of living in the house I built with these very hands. My son Michael came home from work with that serious face he used to make when he was a teenager, and we had to talk about something important. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd done his homework, where he'd cried when his first girlfriend broke up with him, where we'd celebrated his college graduation. "Dad," he said, avoiding eye contact, "Sandra and I have been talking a lot about this situation." What situation? I wondered. The situation of having your father living in his own house. The situation where the man who raised you, who worked day and night to give you everything you needed, now needed a little understanding in his old age. "You gotta understand," he continued, using that voice people use when they want to convince someone of something they know is wrong. "The house is getting too small for us. The kids are growing up, they need their space, and you need care that we can't give you." Care, like I was some terminally ill patient. Like being 74 automatically made me an unbearable burden. It's true I don't move with the agility I once had, that I sometimes forget things, that I need help opening some jars, but I was still the same man who had built that house, brick by brick, thinking about my family's future. "And where exactly am I supposed to go?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "There's a really nice assisted living facility just a few blocks from here," said Sandra, my daughter-in-law, who had appeared out of nowhere like she always did when there was unpleasant news to deliver. "We visited it last week. They have nurses, activities, people your age. You'll be much better off there." People my age, like age was some contagious disease, and I needed to be quarantined with other infected people like me. "And what happens to this house?" I asked, looking at the walls I had painted myself, the floors I had installed working weekends, the garden where I had taught Michael how to ride a bike. "Well," Michael said, clearly uncomfortable, "the house is in your name, but we thought that, since you're going to be living at the facility, we could stay here. That way the kids don't have to change schools, we don't have to move, and you'll be close enough for us to visit you often." Visit often. Like I had been visiting my sister at the nursing home before she died. Once every 2 months, Sunday afternoons, bringing her cheap candy, and staying just long enough not to seem rude. That night, lying in my bed, in the room where I had slept with my wife Carol for 30 years until cancer took her away, where I had watched over her final nights, where I had cried alone after the funeral, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to tell them no. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to beg them to let me stay in my own house. But I also wasn't going to do what they expected me to do, because there was something Michael and Sandra didn't know. Something I had been keeping for more than 20 years, not out of malice, but because I wanted it to be a surprise for when I was no longer here. A secret that was about to become the most expensive lesson of their lives. To understand this story properly, I have to tell you how I got here, because I wasn't always this old man whose son wanted to send to a nursing home like a piece of furniture that no longer served a purpose. I came to this town 50 years ago, newly married to my Carol, rest her soul. We came from a small rural town in Ohio where opportunities were few and the desire to progress was great. I had learned carpentry from my father, but I knew that in the city I could do something more. I got a job at a furniture store downtown. The owner, Mr. Albert, was an older man who taught me not only about wood and varnish, but about life. "Robert," he'd tell me while we were sanding a table, "in this business, what's important isn't just making beautiful furniture, but understanding what each customer needs." Carol worked as a seamstress at a textile factory. She'd get up at 5 in the morning, make breakfast, go work 8 hours sewing uniforms, come home and still have energy to ask me how my day had been. On weekends, she'd do alterations for the neighbors to earn some extra money. "Robert," she'd tell me while ironing the clothes she had washed, "every dollar we save today is going to be another brick in our son's house." And when I'd come home tired from the furniture store, with my hands full of splinters and my body aching, she'd make me coffee and massage my shoulders. "My love," she'd whisper in my ear, "you're the hardest working man I know. Michael is going to be proud of his dad someday." Every cent we earned had a purpose. First, pay the rent on that 2-bedroom apartment where we lived. Then, save for the lot where we were going to build our house. And when Michael was born, we had already started raising the walls. I vividly remember the day we found out Carol was pregnant. We were having dinner. She had made meatloaf with mashed potatoes, her specialty, and suddenly she turned pale and ran to the bathroom. When she came out, her eyes were shining. "Robert," she said, "I think we're going to be 3 in this family." That night, I didn't sleep. Not from nerves, but from excitement. Carol stayed up with me, curled up in my arms. "What are you thinking about?" she asked me. "About wanting to be the best dad in the world for this child." "You already are," she said, kissing my cheek. "I know because I see how you take care of me. A man who loves his wife like this is going to love his son like this." Michael was born on a Tuesday in March. He was small, wrinkled, and when I held him in my arms for the first time, I cried like I had never cried before. Carol watched me from the hospital bed with that tired but happy smile of new mothers. "What are we going to name him?" she asked me. "Michael," I said without hesitation. "Like my grandfather. He was a hard-working, honest man who valued family above everything." From that day on, everything I did was thinking about Michael. I worked double shifts at the furniture store. Saturdays and Sundays, I did private jobs, fixed chairs, made custom closets, repaired doors. Carol helped me sanding, painting, doing a little bit of everything. When Michael was 2 years old, we bought the lot. It was a piece of land on the outskirts of town. No paved roads, no sewers. But it was ours. I remember taking Michael in my arms to see our land. He didn't understand anything, of course, but I talked to him like he was an adult. "This is where your room is going to be, son," I'd tell him, pointing to an empty space among the weeds. "And here is where the kitchen is going to be, where your mom will make your favorite meals." Building that house took me 5 years. 5 years of getting up at 5 in the morning, working 8 hours at the furniture store, coming home, eating something quick that Carol had left prepared for me, and continuing to build until it got dark. Michael grew up watching all that effort. When he was 5, he was already helping me by bringing me tools. When he was 8, he could tell a Phillips head screwdriver from a regular one. When he was 10, he could mix cement better than some construction workers I knew. Dad, he asked me one day while I was installing the bathroom tiles, when is the house going to be finished? When you're grown up, son, I'd answer, carrying him on my shoulders so he could see better. This house is going to be yours someday. I paid for the best education I could afford. While I continued working with my hands, sanding wood and varnishing furniture, he studied engineering at the most prestigious private university in the city. Every month, when the bill came, I paid without complaint, even though it meant eating spaghetti with butter all week. Carol supported me in everything. Robert, she'd tell me when she saw me worried about expenses, "You're making an investment in our son's future. Everything is going to be worth it." When Michael graduated, I threw a party in the house's backyard. I invited all the neighbors, my co-workers from the furniture store, all the family. I had never been so proud in my life. "Look at what this boy accomplished," I'd tell everyone. "He came from a working-class family and now he's an engineer." Michael gave the thank you speech, all elegant in his new suit, and when he mentioned that none of this would have been possible without his parents' sacrifice, my eyes filled with tears. Carol died when Michael was 28. Breast cancer. Those were the hardest months of my life. Taking care of her at night after working all day, taking her to chemotherapy treatments, buying medicines that cost a fortune. Michael helped financially, yes, but the one who stayed up all night holding her hand while she vomited from the treatment effects was me. The one who bathed her when she could no longer do it herself, who read her books when she no longer had the strength to hold them, who promised her everything would be okay, even though we knew it wasn't true. The night Carol died, I was alone with her at the hospital. Michael had come that afternoon, but had to leave because Sandra, his girlfriend at the time, had an important family dinner. "Robert," Carol whispered to me with what voice she had left, "take good care of Michael. And take care of yourself, too." "Don't talk like that," I told her, though I knew it was the end. "You're going to get through this. Promise me something," she said, squeezing my hand with a strength I didn't know she had left. "Promise me you won't be a burden to him when you're old. Promise me you'll be happy." I promised her, not knowing that 30 years later, that promise would take on a completely different meaning. After the funeral, Michael went to live with Sandra. "Dad," he told me, "I need to make my own life. You understand, don't you?" Of course I understood. It was natural for a young man to want independence. But that house became very empty without Carol, and without him. For years, Michael continued coming for Sunday lunch. He'd tell me about his work at the engineering consulting firm, about his projects, about his plans. When he married Sandra, he introduced her to me formally at home. She seemed like a good girl, although somewhat cold, but I thought, if my son chose her, he must have his reasons. The wedding was at an elegant country club downtown. I paid my share without problems, although I had to sell my pickup truck to do it. Michael was so happy that day, so elegant in his tuxedo, that nothing else mattered to me. The reception had everything: prime rib, an open bar, and even a jazz band I had never heard of, but Sandra insisted was essential. They went to Europe for their honeymoon. 2 weeks. When they came back, Michael brought me an expensive bottle of French wine. "So we can drink it together when you have a special occasion, Dad." That bottle is still in my cupboard, right next to the apple pie spice blend Carol used to use every 4th of July. Apparently, There was never an occasion special enough for either. When the twins were born, Joaquin and Valentina, this house filled with life again. Every time they came to visit, I was transformed. I made them wooden toys in my small workshop in the back, little horses, cars, dolls. I cooked their favorite meals for them. I told them stories about when their dad was little. But little by little, the visits became less frequent. First, they stopped coming every Sunday, then every 2 weeks, then once a month. Finally, they practically stopped coming, except for birthdays or Christmas. And when they did come, it was evident that Sandra was in a hurry to leave. There was always an excuse. The kids had to do homework. They had social commitments. It was too late. "Robert needs to rest," Sandra would say, as if I were a sick person who needed rest. "He's already cooked too much for us." But I didn't get tired cooking for my family. I got tired of the indifference, the feeling that my presence was a formality that had to be fulfilled. The abandonment didn't start overnight. It was gradual, like those leaks that at first don't bother you, but little by little rot all the wood until one day the roof falls on you. After Michael married Sandra, things began to change subtly. At first they were small details that I tried to ignore, thinking it was my imagination, or that Sandra needed time to get used to having a father-in-law. When they came for Sunday lunch, Sandra always found some way to make me feel like I was in the way. It wasn't something obvious. It was more subtle than that. For example, when I told some anecdote about when Michael was little, she would yawn or look at her phone. When I offered to help clear the table, she'd tell me, "No, Robert, you rest. You've done enough. You've done enough." As if preparing lunch for my family was a superhuman effort that deserved recognition. The gifts I made for my grandchildren began to be received with less enthusiasm. I spent hours in my workshop making wooden toys, trucks, doll houses, puzzles. I carved them, sanded them, painted them carefully, thinking about the joy they would bring them. But Sandra always had some comment. "Oh, Robert, you didn't have to bother. The kids already have so many toys." Or worse, "Be careful, kids, the paint might be toxic." Toxic. I had used the same paints I used for fine furniture at the furniture store. Expensive paints, of the best quality. But for Sandra, everything I did had something wrong with it. Michael, who used to defend me when his wife made those comments, began to stay quiet. And then, worse still, he began to second her. "Dad, don't worry about making toys. The kids already have everything." As if the problem was the work it took me to make them, and not the love I put into each one. The Sundays began to get shorter. They'd arrive after noon, eat quickly, and leave before 3. I prepared food for a regiment because I loved cooking for my family, but there was always everything left over. "Robert, don't cook so much," Sandra would tell me. "The kids eat very little, and we're on a diet." But I had seen them eat. The kids ate just fine. It was she who was in a hurry to leave. Then the cancellations began. Michael would call me Friday nights. "Dad, we won't be able to come tomorrow. Sandra doesn't feel well." Or, "The kids have colds. We better stay home." Or, "We have a birthday party with Sandra's family." There was always an excuse, and it was always Sandra's family that had priority. One Saturday, I decided to go visit them myself. It was a mistake. When I rang the doorbell, Sandra answered with a look of surprise that wasn't pleasant at all. "Robert? I didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to see the kids," I told her. "It's been weeks since they've come. Michael isn't here. He went to his Sunday football game with his college buddies down at Murphy's Sports Bar. It was true. Sundays, Michael played touch football with his engineering school friends. Then they'd watch the NFL games over beers and buffalo wings. But I had come to see my grandchildren too. The kids were watching TV in the living room. When they saw me, they shouted, "Grandpa," and ran to hug me. That filled my heart. But Sandra immediately called them. "Kids, come here. You need to take a bath." It was midsummer, 3 in the afternoon. There was no reason to bathe them at that time. "Can I stay for a little while?" I asked her. "I wanted to chat with them." "It's just that we have plans for later," she told me, without inviting me past the entrance hall. Another day would be better. I stood at the door like a door-to-door salesman. Sandra didn't even offer me a glass of water. After a few uncomfortable minutes, she told me, "Well, Robert, when Michael gets back, I'll tell him you came by." And she closed the door. I walked to the bus stop feeling humiliated. That day, I understood that for Sandra, I wasn't her husband's father. I was a nuisance, an old man who made her uncomfortable with his presence. But what hurt me most was that Michael never asked me why I had gone to visit them. He never called to apologize for his wife's attitude. He simply acted as if nothing had happened. The Christmases became a formality. They'd come for an hour, eat something quickly. The kids would open the presents I had bought them, and they'd leave. "We have to go have dinner with Sandra's family," was the usual excuse. They never invited me to meet that family. They never included me in their Christmas plans. I spent the holidays alone, watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and A Christmas Carol, remembering when Michael was little and we'd set up the Christmas tree together, when he'd help me string the lights around our front porch, when Carol would make her famous sugar cookies, and we'd eat them warm from the oven while watching It's a Wonderful Life. When I turned 70, I waited all afternoon for them to come say hello. I had bought a cake, made empanadas, cleaned the whole house. At 8 at night, Michael called me on the phone. "Dad, happy birthday. Sorry we couldn't come, but we had an emergency." He didn't explain what emergency. He didn't really apologize. He didn't suggest coming another day. That night I ate cake alone, looking at photos of when Michael was little and helped me in the workshop. I wondered where I had failed as a father, what I had done wrong for my son to treat me like I was a stranger. And now, 4 years later, that same son who didn't have time to come see me, who couldn't spend a full afternoon with me, was telling me I had to leave my house so they could live more comfortably. But as I told you at the beginning, there were things Michael didn't know, things I had been keeping, not out of malice, but because I never thought I'd need them to defend myself from my own son. Now comes the part my son never imagined. While he believed I was just an old retiree living on a miserable pension, I had been making financial decisions that he considered impossible for someone like me. Do you remember I told you I worked as a carpenter at a furniture store? Well, in all those years, I learned something very important. Money isn't earned just by working hard, but by working smart. And I, although I didn't have university studies like my son, had something he never had: business vision. Mr. Albert, the owner of the furniture store, was a very astute man. Besides making furniture, he bought old houses, remodeled them, and sold them. "Robert," he'd tell me, "wood can burn, but land always has value." I listened to him carefully. For years, besides my salary, Mr. Albert paid me extra for the remodeling work I did on those houses. I learned not only to work with wood, but to evaluate properties, to see potential that others didn't see. When Mr. Albert retired, he offered to sell me the furniture store. I don't have the money, I told him. Do like I did, he replied. Buy it little by little. That's what I did. For 10 years, besides paying for my house, I was saving every extra dollar I earned. Carol thought I had become stingy, but I didn't explain my plans well because I wanted it to be a surprise. When I was finally able to buy the furniture store, I was already a 50-year-old man with experience not only as an employee, but observing how Mr. Albert ran the business. I knew which customers paid on time, which woods were worth buying, which furniture sold best. But the furniture store was just the first step. With the profits from the business, I began buying properties. Old houses nobody wanted, small apartments in neighborhoods that were starting to grow, lots on the outskirts of town. Robert, Carol would tell me, why do you buy so many things? Don't you think it's too much risk? Woman, I'd answer her, this is for Michael's future. Someday, he's going to have an inheritance he can't even imagine. For 20 years, I bought, remodeled, and sold properties. Some I'd sell quickly to get cash. Others I'd rent for steady income. And others I'd keep because I knew they'd be worth much more in the future. When Michael graduated as an engineer, I already had a small real estate empire that he didn't know about. I had the furniture store, which continued to do well. I had 6 properties that I rented out. I had 3 lots in areas that were starting to develop. And I had a bank account with savings that had grown year after year. Carol died without knowing exactly how much money we had. She knew we were doing well, but I never told her the exact figures because I wanted to surprise her when Michael got married and we could enjoy our grandchildren without financial worries. After Carol's funeral, I was tempted to tell Michael everything. I thought that knowing his father had been successful in business would make him feel proud. But then I decided to wait. Better tell him when he has children, I thought. That way, he'll be able to enjoy it with his family. How wrong I was. The last 10 years were the most profitable. The properties I had bought cheap revalued enormously. The lots I had bought on the outskirts were now in the center of new urban developments. The city had grown toward them, just as I had foreseen. A real estate company offered me a fortune for one of the lots. Mr. Robert, the appraiser told me, you have an excellent eye for business. This lot is worth 20 times what you paid for it today. 20 times. But I didn't sell. I kept waiting for the perfect moment to share that joy with my son. 2 years ago, a developer made me an offer for 3 of my properties that left me speechless. It was a sum that would officially make me a millionaire. Millionaire. Me, Robert Mitchell, the carpenter who had arrived from the small town without a penny. But I kept waiting. I kept thinking it was better to save that surprise for when Michael really needed me, or for when I was no longer here, and he found all the papers among my things. I never thought the moment would come this way. I never thought my son would kick me out of my own house without knowing he was kicking out one of the richest men in the neighborhood. That night, after Michael told me I had to go to the nursing home, I opened the safe I have hidden behind a piece of furniture in my room. I looked at all the property deeds, the rental contracts, the bank statements. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel pride for what I had achieved. I felt a deep sadness, because all that money I had saved thinking about my family's future now had to be used for something completely different. If it were you, what would you do? Would you tell your son he's rich so he'd change his mind? Or would you give him a lesson he'd never forget? Suddenly, my son, who hadn't visited me spontaneously in years, started showing up every day. But he didn't come alone. He came with Sandra, with the kids, and even with an architect to plan the renovations they were going to do when I left. The first time they brought the architect was a week after they told me I had to leave. Michael rang the doorbell like he was a visitor, when he had grown up in that house, when that house had been his home for 25 years. "Dad," he said, "meet architect Fernandez. He's going to help us reorganize the spaces a bit when you move." Reorganize the spaces. Like it was an office that needed optimization, not the house where I had lived 30 years with Carol, where we had raised our son, where we had been happy. The architect greeted me politely, but it was evident that to him I was an obstacle that would soon be removed. He took out a tablet and started taking measurements, taking photos, talking about tearing down this wall and expanding this room. "You see this room?" Sandra was telling the architect, pointing to my workshop. "Here we could make a study for Michael, or maybe a playroom for the kids." My workshop. The place where I had spent thousands of hours making toys for Michael when he was little, where I had repaired all the furniture in the house, where I had found peace after Carol's death. They wanted to turn it into a playroom. "And this room?" the architect asked, pointing to the bedroom I had shared with Carol. "That's going to be ours," Sandra said with a naturalness that chilled my blood. "It's the biggest and has the best place to put the air conditioning. Our room, the room where Carol had given birth to Michael because we didn't make it to the hospital in time. The room where she had died in my arms. The room where I had cried her loss for months. For Sandra, it was simply the biggest. The strangest thing was seeing Michael. He was more attentive to me than he had been in years. "Dad, do you want me to make you some coffee? Dad, do you need help with anything? Dad, are you comfortable sitting there?" So much consideration all of a sudden sounded fake to me, like when someone treats you well because they need a favor. Sandra, who normally only spoke to me when strictly necessary, now smiled at me all the time. "Robert, how are you? You look very good. Are you eating well? Do you need me to bring you anything from the supermarket?" The kids, my grandchildren, seemed confused by all the movement. "Grandpa," Joaquin, the older one, asked me, "why does Mom say you're going to go live somewhere else?" I didn't know what to answer. How do you explain to a 9-year-old boy that his dad is kicking Grandpa out of his own house? Michael stepped forward. "Grandpa is going to live in a place where he'll be better taken care of, where he'll have friends his age. Friends my age, like I was a child who needed playmates." During that week, they started showing up with gifts. Michael brought me a new shirt. "Dad, I saw this shirt and thought of you." Sandra brought me candy from the confectionery. "Robert, this is so you have something nice for after lunch. The kids made me drawings at school." "Grandpa, this is for you, so you remember us." All very nice, all very sweet. But I knew what was happening. After years of treating me like old furniture, now they showered me with attention because they needed me to leave without making a scene. They needed me to accept their decision without protesting. One afternoon, Michael stayed after the others left. "Dad, I want us to talk," he said, sitting in the chair where Carol used to sit to drink coffee with me. "I know this is difficult for you, but we really think it's for the best." He settled into the chair, as if he were going to give an important lecture. "Dad, you're not young anymore. What happens if you fall and there's no one to help you? What happens if you feel sick in the early morning? At the facility, you'll have nurses 24 hours a day." He kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. I looked at him and saw a stranger. Where was the child who helped me hammer nails? Where was the young man who cried in my arms when his mother died? Where was the son who told me I was the best dad in the world? Besides, he continued, Sandra and I really need more space. The kids are growing up. They need their privacy. And we also need our space as a couple. That's when I realized something that hurt me more than everything before. My son wasn't asking me to leave. He was explaining to me why it was inevitable that I leave. He had already made the decision, and now he just needed me to accept it without problems. "Dad," he said, and put his hand on my shoulder like he used to when he was little and wanted to ask me for something important. "I know you understand me. You were always understanding. You always put family first." Family first. What irony. I had put family first my whole life. I had worked like a mule to give him a house, an education, a future. And now he was telling me to put family first by accepting being kicked out of my own house. "All right, son," I told him. "I'll do what you want." His face lit up. "Dad, I knew you'd understand. You're the best father in the world." The best father in the world. He said it just when he was kicking me out of the house. That night, after he left, I took out all the papers from the safe again. The property deeds, the bank statements, the rental contracts. And I made the most important decision of my life. While looking at all those documents, I remembered something Carol had told me years ago, when Michael had started studying at university, and sometimes came home with airs of superiority. "Robert," she had told me one night after Michael criticized the food she had prepared, "a son who doesn't respect the table where he eats won't respect the hand that set it either." "He's young, Carol. He'll mature." "Maybe," she had replied, "but meanwhile, we don't have to allow him to disrespect us. Love without limits isn't love, it's complicity." At that moment, I didn't fully understand what she meant. Now, 30 years later, her words resonated in my mind with painful clarity. Carol had seen what I didn't want to see, that I was raising a son who believed he deserved everything without effort, who thought his parents' love was unconditional no matter how he treated them. "Respect is taught by example," she had also told me. "If you don't respect yourself, Michael won't respect you either." If my son thought I was a useless old man who had no options, he was very wrong. If he thought he could manipulate me with fake affection and cheap gifts, he was very wrong. And if he thought he was going to keep this house without consequences, he was very wrong. Carol was right. It was time for me to respect myself. The next day, I made the calls that would change everything. Calls my son never imagined I could make. The first call I made at 8 in the morning. I called Dr. Herrera, a lawyer specializing in family law, whom I had known years ago when I bought one of my properties. "Doctor, this is Robert Mitchell. Do you remember me?" "Of course, Mr. Robert. How can I help you?" "I need to make some urgent changes to my will." There was a pause on the other side. "Urgent changes? Is everything all right?" "No, doctor. Everything is not all right. But it's going to be better after we talk." I explained the whole situation to him, how my son was kicking me out of my own house, how he thought I was a poor old man with no options, how he had planned the whole operation without really consulting me. "Doctor," I told him when I finished telling the story, "I want to completely change my will, and I want to do some other things too." "Mr. Robert, I understand your situation, but are you sure you want to make such important decisions while you're angry? Doctor, I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. And that disappointment has given me a clarity I didn't have before. The second call was to the real estate agency that managed my rentals. Mrs. Garcia, this is Robert Mitchell. I want to put 3 of my properties up for sale. 3 properties, Mr. Robert? Are you sure? The market is very good to keep renting. I'm sure. And I want the sale to be quick. I'm willing to lower the price a bit if necessary. The third call was the most important. I called my sister Elena, who lives in Phoenix. Elena, it's Robert. I need to ask you a very big favor. Tell me, brother. What do you need? Can I come stay at your house for a few months? I'll explain everything when I get there, but it's urgent. Elena, who had always been a practical and intelligent woman, didn't ask me questions. Robert, this house is yours. Come whenever you want. I spent that week as if nothing was happening. Michael continued coming every day with Sandra and the kids. They continued showering me with fake attention, continued making plans for when I wouldn't be there. One day, I heard Sandra talking on the phone with someone. Probably a friend. Yes, we almost have the old man thing resolved. He's going to the facility next week. You'll see how beautiful the house looks when we finish the renovations. The old man. That's what she called me when she thought I wasn't listening. Not my father-in-law or Robert. The old man. Michael showed me the facility brochures. Look, Dad, how nice it looks. They have nurses. They have activities. They even have a TV room with cable. He talked like he was offering me a vacation at a 5-star hotel. And how much does it cost? I asked him. Don't worry about that, Dad. With your Social Security and something we contribute, it's enough. Something they contributed. How generous. They kicked me out of my house and also offered to help pay for my confinement. On Thursday, when there were 3 days left before I was supposedly going to the facility, Michael came with a suitcase and Sandra with cardboard boxes. Dad, I brought this so you can start packing your things. I thought maybe you needed help deciding what to take. While Michael was talking, Sandra had already started taking things down from the walls. She took the framed photo of Carol and me on our wedding day, looked at it for a second, and put it in a box like it was just any object. Be careful with that photo, I told her, but she had already moved on to the next one. What to take and what to leave, I asked Michael. Well, Dad, at the facility you won't have much space. You can take clothes, some memories, Mom's photos, but the furniture and those things you can leave. We'll take care of them. Then I saw something that broke my heart. Valentina had entered my workshop and was collecting the wooden toys I had made for her and her brother. She hugged them against her chest like they were treasures. Mommy, she said to Sandra, are the toys Grandpa made going away too? Oh, my love, those toys are already very old. In the new house, you'll have prettier toys. Valentina looked at me with those big eyes full of tears. But Grandpa, who's going to fix my little horse if it breaks? I didn't know what to answer. Michael took out his keychain, where he had a copy of my house key that I had given him years ago for emergencies. He separated it from the rest with a naturalness that chilled my blood, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Well, you won't need us to have a copy anymore, he said, putting the key in his pocket. Of course. They were going to take care of my furniture. The furniture I had made with my own hands. The ones I had bought working from sunrise to sunset. they were going to take care of for their own use. From the window, I saw that Mrs. Garcia, my neighbor across the street, was watching the whole scene from her garden. When our eyes met, she shook her head and went into her house, clearly uncomfortable with what she was witnessing. That night, for the first time in a week, I allowed myself to smile. Really smile. Because my son had no idea what was coming. Friday was the longest day of my life. In the morning, I got confirmation from the lawyer that all the papers were ready. In the afternoon, they confirmed from the real estate agency that they already had serious offers for the 3 properties. Michael came with Sandra and the kids. Well, Dad, tomorrow is the big day. Everything is already arranged at the facility. They're going to receive you at 10 in the morning. The kids hugged me. Grandpa, we're going to miss you, Valentina told me. And I knew it was true. The only ones who were really going to miss me were them. Don't worry, I told them. Grandpa isn't going very far. Michael smiled. Of course, Dad. We're going to visit you every week. Every week. Like they had been coming every week for the last few years. That night I packed my suitcase. But not to go to the facility. I had other plans. Plans my son would discover very soon. Before going to bed, I walked through the whole house. The house I had built thinking about my family's future. The house my own son was kicking me out of to live more comfortably. Tomorrow was going to be a day none of us would ever forget. Saturday morning, I got up earlier than ever. Not because I was nervous, but because I had many things to do before Michael arrived. At 7 in the morning, I called Dr. Herrera. Doctor, today the plan is executed. Mr. Robert, are you sure you want to do this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. All right. The papers are going to arrive at your house at 11 in the morning. Is Michael going to be there? He'll be there. And it's going to be the surprise of his life. Then I called Elena. Sister, I'm leaving for your house today. Do you need me to come get you? No, I'm going in my car. Your car? I thought you didn't have a car. Ah, well, there are many things the family doesn't know about me. I'll tell you everything when I get there. At 8:30, the doorbell rang. It was Michael, who came with Sandra and the kids to accompany me on this special day. Good morning, Dad. Do you have everything ready? Yes, son. Everything ready. I looked at my grandchildren and my heart ached. They weren't to blame for anything. They were victims of their parents' ambition. Joaquin pulled on my shirt sleeve. Grandpa, Mom says you're leaving because you can't take care of yourself anymore. But I can't help you. I know how to make coffee. Sandra turned red. Joaquin, don't bother Grandpa with questions. But Mommy, Valentina insisted, why does Grandpa have to leave? At Grandma Martha's house, Grandpa lives with them and he's fine. It's different, my love, Sandra said impatiently. Grandpa Robert needs special care. What care? Joaquin asked. Is he sick? Michael intervened quickly. Kids, we already talked about this. Grandpa is going to be better where he's going. But Valentina wasn't satisfied. And what if he doesn't want to go? What if he wants to stay in his house? An uncomfortable silence filled the room. My grandchildren had asked the questions no adult dared to ask. Kids, Grandpa loves you very much. Always remember that, no matter what happens. Michael smiled. Dad, don't talk like you're going to the end of the world. The facility is 20 minutes from here. While they loaded my suitcase in the car, I saw that several neighbors had come out to their gardens or were looking out their windows. Mr. Carlos, my next-door neighbor, was watering the plants, but it was obvious he was paying attention to the whole scene. When I got in the car, I heard Mrs. Garcia telling her husband, "I can't believe what they're doing. Poor Mr. Robert, after everything he did for that family." And Mr. Antonio replied, "In my day, children took care of their parents at home. This is a shame." Michael and Sandra also heard the comments, but pretended not to notice. At 10 o'clock sharp, Michael told me, "Well, Dad, it's time to go." "Yes, son, it's time." I took my small suitcase and walked to the door. On the threshold, I turned to look at the house one last time. "Goodbye, house," I said quietly. During the trip to the facility, Michael was more talkative than he had been in years. "Dad, you'll see that you're going to like it. They have many activities. The food is good. The other residents are very nice." The other residents? Like I was just one more of the bunch. We arrived at the facility at 10:20. It was a gray building with small windows and a neglected garden. Nothing like the photos in the brochures Michael had shown me. "Well, Dad, here we are." "Yes, son, here we are." I got out of the car with my suitcase. Michael was parking when my cell phone rang. "Mr. Robert? This is Dr. Herrera. The papers have just been delivered to your house." "Perfect, Doctor. Thank you very much." I hung up and looked at Michael, who was approaching with a smile that was going to disappear very soon. "Everything all right, Dad? Who were you talking to?" "Nobody important, son. Let's go." We entered the facility. The place smelled of disinfectant and reheated food. A nurse received us with a folder full of papers. "You must be Mr. Mitchell. Welcome. Your son already told us about your situation." My situation, like I was a clinical case. While the nurse explained to Michael the visiting hours and the institution's rules, I took out my phone and sent a WhatsApp message I had prepared for days. It was for all my neighbors, my former co-workers from the furniture store, all the people who knew me. The message said, "Today my son put me in a nursing home to be able to keep my house. But he doesn't know I'm a millionaire. In half an hour he's going to find out everything. I ask you to pay attention." I put the phone away and looked at Michael, who was still talking to the nurse about medications and special care. "Michael," I told him. "Yes, Dad?" "There's something I have to tell you." He approached with that fake worried face he'd been using all week. "What's wrong, Dad? Do you feel bad?" "No, son. I feel very good. What happens is that there are some things you don't know about your old man." "What things, Dad?" I looked at my watch. 5 to 11. In 5 minutes, the messenger was going to arrive at the house with the papers that would change everything. "You think I'm a poor old man who has no choice but to live off his son's charity?" "No, Dad. It's not charity. It's family love." "Family love, Michael?" "It's been 3 years since you came to my house spontaneously. It's been 3 years since your children know me less than their other grandparents, and now you tell me you're kicking me out of my own house out of family love." "Dad, it's not like that. Let me finish, son. There's something you need to know." At that moment, my phone rang. It was exactly 11 o'clock. "Mr. Robert, the papers were delivered. Your son must have received them at this very moment." I hung up and looked at Michael. "Son, you just received some papers at home. I recommend you go read them." Michael looked at me with that confused face he made when he was little and didn't understand something. "What papers, Dad?" "I don't understand anything. Go home, son. Go read the papers the messenger just brought. And when you read them, come back here if you want to talk to me." "Dad, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" The nurse was looking at us without understanding anything. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" "No," I told her. "There's no problem. But my son has to go urgently to his house." Michael took out his phone and called Sandra. "Honey, did any messenger come to the house? Did they bring you papers for me?" I could hear Sandra on the other side talking fast, agitated. Michael turned pale. "What do the papers say? Did you read them?" Pause. "No, don't open them. Wait for me, I'm coming." He hung up and looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time in his life. "Dad, what did you do?" "What I had to do, son. What I should have done a long time ago." He left running without saying goodbye. I stayed at the facility, sitting in a plastic chair in the entrance hall, waiting. The nurse asked me if I wanted to see the room they had assigned me. "No, miss, not yet. I'm waiting for my son to come back." An hour passed, then another. At 1 in the afternoon, my phone started ringing nonstop. First, my next-door neighbor called me. "Robert, what's happening at your house? Your son just arrived screaming like crazy, and Sandra's crying on the sidewalk." Then my buddy Raul called me. "Robert, my wife told me she saw Sandra making a scene at your front door. Is it true they kicked you out?" Then the lady from the grocery store called me. "Mr. Robert, are you okay? There's quite a commotion here. The whole neighborhood is talking about what happened." But the call that really told me how far the news had spread came from my old coworker Jimmy from the furniture store. "Bob, you old dog. I just heard from my wife, who heard from her sister, who lives on Maple Street, that you're some kind of secret millionaire. She said there are news vans and everything. Man, I always knew you were smart. But this is incredible. Good for you for not taking their crap." Within hours, it seemed like half the town knew that the quiet old carpenter, who'd been treated like garbage by his own family, was actually richer than most people could imagine. The story was spreading like wildfire. The millionaire father kicked out by his ungrateful son. At 2 in the afternoon, Michael arrived at the facility. He came alone, without Sandra, without the kids. His face was haggard, like he had seen a ghost. His hands were shaking when he sat next to me. But before he could even sit down properly, my phone rang again. It was Mrs. Garcia. "Robert, you need to know what's happening. Channel 7 News just pulled up to your house. Apparently someone called them about the millionaire senior kicked out by his own son. There's a reporter asking Sandra questions on camera, and she's crying, saying it's all a misunderstanding. The whole street is watching. Mr. Thompson from 3 houses down is telling everyone he always knew you were smart with money. Even the mailman stopped to watch." I put the phone on speaker so Michael could hear. His face went from pale to green. "And Robert," Mrs. Garcia continued, "that fancy car you never told us about. The one that's been parked in your garage under that tarp all these years. Sandra had to move it so the news van could park, and now everyone's asking whose Mercedes it is. The reporter is having a field day." Michael looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. He stayed silent for several minutes after I hung up, just staring at his hands. Then he took out a folder with trembling hands and put the papers on the little table in front of us. "Dad," he said in a broken voice I had never heard from him, "is all this true?" The papers were very clear. The first was a copy of my new will. The second was a summary of all my properties and investments. The third was a letter explaining my decisions. "Yes, son, it's all true." "Dad, these numbers, this amount of properties, you have all this." He ran his hands over his face, as if trying to wake up from a bad dream. Yes, Michael. Your poor old man, your useless old man you just put in a nursing home, is a millionaire. My God, he murmured. My God, what did I do? Dad? I didn't know. If I had known. What? If you had known I had money, you wouldn't have kicked me out? Is that your way of apologizing? No, that's not it. It's just that, Dad, I was wrong about everything. Completely wrong about everything. His eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the scared child he had once been. Dad, the neighbors yelled at me in the street. Mrs. Garcia told me I was a disgrace. Mr. Carlos wouldn't even look at me. And Sandra, when she read the papers, told me I'm an idiot, that I lost the kid's entire inheritance for being ungrateful. Of course you didn't know, because you never cared to know. In all these years, did you ever ask me how I was doing financially? Did you ever worry about knowing if I needed anything? Did you ever think that maybe your old man had more things saved than you thought? But Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? That's when I remembered Carol's words, as vividly as if I were hearing them at that moment, because I wanted to save it to give it to you as an inheritance, Michael. Your mom always told me, Robert, you work hard for Michael, but you also have to teach him to value what he has. I thought love was giving him everything without him having to work for it. Your mom was wiser. I remembered one night, shortly before Carol died, when she had told me something that now made complete sense. Robert, she had whispered to me from the hospital bed, don't give everything to Michael at once. Make him earn your respect, not just your money. A son who doesn't value his father won't value his inheritance either. At that moment, I hadn't listened to her. I thought it was the pain talking. But Carol had seen something I didn't want to see. I wanted that when I died, you would open the safe and find all this as a surprise. I wanted you to say, my old man was smarter than I thought. Your mom told me that the day I told you, it had to be the day you really needed me, not the day you needed my money. And now? Michael asked, with red eyes from crying. Now, I continued telling him, after what you did to me, everything changed. Carol was right. I had to teach you to value me before teaching you to value what I had built. What do you mean? I took out another paper from my pocket. It was the documentation of the donations I had made. This paper says that 80% of my fortune is going to charity, orphanages, real nursing homes, children's soup kitchens, people who really need help. And the other 20%? The other 20% I'm going to leave to my grandchildren, but in a trust they can only touch when they turn 25. And with one condition, that they visit their grandfather at least once a month until he dies. Michael covered his face with his hands. And what's left for me? For you, son, what you chose to be left remains. The pride of having kicked your father out of his own house remains. The satisfaction of having put me in a nursing home remains. The peace of mind of knowing you did the right thing remains. Dad, I can change all this. I can cancel the facility thing. You can come back home. No, Michael, you can't change anything, because what you did isn't erased by being sorry. What you did showed me who you really are, and it's not the son I thought I had raised. He stayed crying in silence. For the first time in years, I saw him cry, like when he was little and got hurt playing. Dad, forgive me. I didn't know. The problem, son, isn't that you didn't know I had money. The problem is that you didn't know I had feelings. After that conversation at the facility, I didn't see Michael again for 3 months. But I knew everything that was happening through the neighbors who called to tell me every detail. I went to live with Elena in Phoenix. In her house, for the first time in years, I felt like a person, not like a nuisance. Elena made me breakfast every morning, asked me how I had slept, included me in conversations when her children came to visit her. "Robert," Elena would tell me, "I don't understand how Michael could do that to you, but I'm glad you made the decision you made." With part of the money from the properties I sold, I bought a small but comfortable apartment in a quiet neighborhood in Phoenix. It had a nice view of a park where I went for walks every morning. For the first time in decades, I woke up without that tightness in my chest I had had for the last few years. I started doing things I had never had time to do. I enrolled in a carpentry workshop for older adults. I met Mr. Raoul, a former teacher who had gone through something similar with his family. We became friends, drank coffee in the park, played cards at the neighborhood club. "Blood family isn't always heart family," Mr. Raoul would tell me. "Sometimes you have to find your own tribe." I also started doing volunteer work at a children's soup kitchen. I helped serve food, played with the kids, told them stories. Those children who had almost nothing treated me with more affection than my own son had treated me in years. One day, one of the volunteers at the soup kitchen told me, "Mr. Robert, you have a special light. The kids adore you." And I thought, how strange that strangers can see that light that my own family had stopped seeing so long ago. Meanwhile, through the neighbors, I found out about everything that was happening at my old house. Sandra had gone into a nervous breakdown when she found out they had lost a millionaire inheritance. She started blaming Michael for everything. "If you had known your father had money, we never would have gone through this embarrassment," she would scream for the whole neighborhood to hear. The money. We always came back to the money. It wasn't that she felt bad for kicking me out of the house. She felt bad for missing out on the inheritance. The kids started asking why Grandpa wasn't coming back home. Michael didn't know what to tell them. How was he going to explain that they had kicked out Grandpa, who turned out to be a millionaire? One day, Mr. Raoul told me something that marked me. "Robert, the sweetest revenge isn't hurting the one who hurt you. The sweetest revenge is living well despite what they did to you." And he was right. I was living better than ever. I got up when I wanted, ate what I felt like, went where I wanted to go. Nobody treated me like a nuisance. Nobody sighed when they saw me arrive. At the children's soup kitchen, I met Maria, a 68-year-old woman who had recently been widowed and also did volunteer work. She was an intelligent woman with a sweet smile and a very loving way of talking to the kids. "Mr. Robert," she told me one day after I told the children a story, "you must have been a wonderful father." "That's what I thought," I replied. "But it seems I was wrong." "Children sometimes make mistakes," Maria told me, "but that doesn't mean you were wrong as a father." We started having coffee after volunteer work. She told me about her children who lived in the interior and visited her often. I told her my story, and she listened without judging, without giving advice I hadn't asked for. "Don't you miss your son?" she asked me one day. "I miss the son I thought I had," I replied. "The son who helped me in the workshop when he was little. The son who cried in my arms when he got hurt. But this man who kicked me out of my house, him I don't miss." 6 months after leaving home, I had already found a new routine, new friends, a new life. A life where I was Robert Mitchell, not Michael's dad. A life where people valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. It's been a year since my son kicked me out of home. A year since he discovered that his useless old man was a millionaire. A year since I had to start my life over at 74 years old. And you know what I tell you? It was the best year I've had in a long time. 4 months ago, Maria and I decided to move in together. We didn't get married, but we share a larger apartment where each of us has our space, and we also have common spaces. She brought me a new family. Her children welcomed me as if I had been their dad all their lives. Mr. Robert, her eldest son, tells me when he comes to visit, "My mom is happier than ever. Thank you for taking care of her." Taking care of her. What a beautiful word. How different it sounds from supporting her or putting up with her. The children's soup kitchen where we volunteer now has a room with my name, Robert Mitchell Hall, where every child finds a grandfather. With part of my fortune, we finance snacks for 300 kids throughout the year. Those kids know me as Grandpa Robert, and when they see me arrive, they shout my name and run to hug me. How strange. I have more grandchildren at that soup kitchen than the 2 I had by my own blood. A month ago, one of those kids from the soup kitchen, an 8-year-old boy named Thomas, told me something that touched my soul. "Grandpa Robert, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of my parents like you take care of us." That's when I understood everything. My real inheritance wasn't the properties I had bought or the money I had saved for years. My real inheritance were the values I could transmit. And it turns out that I was transmitting those values to kids who really valued them. Michael has called me 5 times this year. The first 4 calls were to ask me if we could talk like grown-ups about the inheritance issue. The 5th call was to tell me that Sandra had left him. "Dad," he told me in that last call, "Sandra left with the kids to her parents' house. She says she can't be married to someone who lost a fortune out of pride." Out of pride. How curious. She thought I had donated my money out of pride. She didn't understand that I had done it out of dignity. "And what do you plan to do?" I asked him. "I don't know, Dad. I'm alone in that house that was yours, surrounded by memories, without enough money to maintain it, without family." "Well, son," I told him, "now you know what it feels like." 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from my grandchildren, a letter they wrote themselves, without their parents' help. It said, "Grandpa, they told us you went far away, but we love you and want to see you. Can we come visit you?" That letter was written by Valentina, who is now 10 years old. At the end, there was a drawing made by Joaquin, an old man with a cane standing next to a house, and underneath it said, "I love you, Grandpa." I called them that same night. I talked to them for an hour. I explained to them, in words they could understand, why Grandpa had to leave. I told them that when they were older, if they wanted, they could come visit me. "Grandpa, is it true you're rich?" Joaquin asked me. "Yes, my love, it's true." "And why don't you give us money?" "Because there's something more important than money, my love, and I'm going to give that to you when you're grown up and can understand it." "What thing?" "An example. An example that you don't have to put up with being treated badly just because it's family. An example that you can start over at any age. An example that dignity is not negotiable." The other day, walking in the park with Maria, she asked me, "Robert, don't you regret anything you did?" "You know what I regret?" I replied. "I regret having waited so long to value myself. I regret having endured years of contempt thinking it was normal. I regret not having set boundaries before." "And don't you miss your son?" "I miss the son he could have been if I had taught him better what respect means." But I don't miss the man who kicked me out of my own house. Next month, I'm going to turn 75. Maria and I are planning a trip to Niagara Falls. It's going to be the first time in my life I travel for pleasure, not for work. Mr. Raoul told me last week, "Robert, you look 10 years younger than when I met you." And he's right. When you free yourself from people who hurt you, even if it's your own family, you get younger. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had told Michael about my properties before he kicked me out of the house. But then, I think maybe it was better this way. Maybe I needed to go through all this to discover what I was really made of. Here I am, at 74 years old, living with a woman who loves me, surrounded by friends who value me, helping kids who see me as a hero, living in a place where I'm happy. I lost a son, yes, but I gained a life. And you, who listened to me until here, you who accompanied me in this story, I want you to know something important. If someone treats you badly, if someone disrespects you, if someone makes you feel like you're a nuisance, it doesn't matter who that person is. It doesn't matter if it's your son, your father, your brother, your wife. Nobody, but nobody has the right to hurt you just because they can do it. Life is too short to waste it with people who don't value you. And it's never, never too late to start over. I lost a son, but I found a family. I lost a house, but I gained a home. I lost money, but I gained peace. And what would you choose? Put up with mistreatment out of fear of being alone, or risk being happy? Tell me if this story also made sense to you. And tell me what city you're listening from. Because in the end, what really matters isn't how much you have in the bank, but how much real love you have in your life. And that love, sometimes, you have to look for it in the most unexpected places.